we see the beginnings that will flow into the ultimate ends. It is over for the United States, but we are only in the beginning of that end. Human history has been replete with cycles where for decades and decades we as humanity stack up the dominoes, and then these crisis periods of 3 to 5 years where the dominoes come falling down. Where do you think we are today? It seems like either we're in the very last stages of all the dominoes being set up, or more likely even, we're starting to see the first dominoes falling. And just like dominoes as they start to fall, you can see kind of how this is going to go. You can see how one event will lead to the next event, and how the inevitability of it all makes it so that nobody can really stop it anyway. All the systems of alliances leading into World War I were kind of inevitable looking back upon it. And how World War I flowed into World War II seemed almost inevitable. And we are there again here in human history. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar, and in this video we're going to be talking about the changes that we're seeing in the world around us, the dominoes, so to speak, that have been set up that we're starting to see fall. We're going to be talking about just the arrogance of our society and how we think that we are invulnerable militarily, how politically we are so divided that we cannot work together anymore, how things are just so impossible anymore to have unity in our nation, and this is happening in other countries as well. We're going to be talking about the arrogance of our food supply system, how we have built a system of financialization, bankers running the trade of grains, and how the price of food doesn't even reflect the supplies anymore. We have shortages developing all over the place, like real deep shortages in grains like wheat and rice that are not being reflected in prices because the manufacturers of the staples that go on the shelves like cereals and all the manufactured food, they're artificially keeping the prices down. I know it doesn't sound like they're keeping the prices down, but on the supply side, they are keeping the prices down, and then they're jacking up their prices on the other side. We're also going to be talking about the power grid. Now, we're going to hit all these items, just kind of give you a broad picture of how deep in poodoo we are. This is this kind of stuff that nobody wants to talk about, and when they do, they talk about a little bit of it. And then they kind of go, well, you know, there's just challenges that we need to overcome. Let's talk politically. We have segregated our society into two camps. There's the fully leftist camp, and then there's the everybody else camp. If you're not fully leftist, and I'm not saying liberal, because liberal people are now finding themselves out of the leftists and into the large camp outside. It's either you're a strong leftist or a fascist. The definition of that is the merger of using government power and corporate power to exert full control over a citizenry. Who does that sound like? If you say leftist, you might be onto something there. And it's this, either you are or you are committing violence. If you say anything that they disagree with, it is literal violence, as they are saying now. Justifying in their minds your imprisonment. Justifying alienation from society, them being able to kick you off platforms, seize your bank accounts, like they did with PayPal, right? And then even justifying physical attacks on your person and property. There's another story out there circulating again where these green, leftists are attacking people's SUVs. They're going and deflating people's tires because they think that your SUV is a little too big because you're driving a 4x4 in the city. So they're going and deflating your tires because attacks on your property are justifiable because you're committing violence. And we've seen over the last number of years with a lot of these protests where people in wearing all black, attacking people physically for speaking out, carrying the wrong signs, for showing up at protests. They can hit you in the back of the head with a brick and not feel anything in their conscience about that because you, by disagreeing with them, were committing an act of literal violence. This is the stuff that's being indoctrinated in all the universities. It's scary. The people that are going to be cheering as patriots, and maybe you or I are strung up in the streets, are learning that, are being indoctrinated with that in the schools right now. And what about our arrogance militarily? I mean, this is something I've been harping on for a while, is that it is the person that wins the fight isn't the one with the coolest technology, okay? If you put a fancy sword and a fancy suit of armor on an inexperienced soldier, and then you have a Roman legionnaire with just a stick, who do you think is going to win? The inexperienced, well-equipped person, or the highly trained, highly experienced person? So you can have all the fancy gear that you want. And the United States truly does have really fancy gear, but things are changing. There's been warnings out there that as China spends its budget on purchases of weapon systems and developing weapon systems, they are developing advanced weapon systems 5 to 6 times faster than the United States, because we're just caught up in so much red tape. We cannot develop weapon systems quickly. Our engineers are falling behind. And yes, China is stealing a lot of our engineering stuff and repurposing it. But in the end, it doesn't matter how they're doing it. What matters is the fact that they are doing it. And now it is estimated that they are spending $1 to acquire the same amount of technology and weapons that the United States spends $20 for. So yes, the United States defense budget is over double what China's is, but the fact that they are getting more bang for their buck. How much does it cost for them to build a weapon system like a missile battery? It costs them pennies on the dollar compared to the United States. When they build their own homegrown jet fighters, are they as good as the United States so far? No, apparently they're not. But they're getting them a heck of a lot cheaper. And when we talk about the U.S. Navy has about 300 ships in it. China now has about 350. But you have to remember that about 200 of the U.S.'s Navy ships are in port at any given time being fixed, refurbished, because the United States Navy has to constantly be patrolling the whole world. You know what the Chinese Navy is doing? They're sitting near their ports practicing. And if they were to go up against the United States Navy near their coast, they could mobilize their full fleet of 350 ships on schedule, because they can just do all the maintenance and get it all ready. And since they're not driving those ships all over the world, they can make sure that all of their ships are ready for battle when the battle comes. And the United States will only be able to field 1/3 of its fleet. We'll be outnumbered over 3 to 1 right now, and the rapid pace of China building up their fleet is only accelerating. China is building ships like it's going out of style. And they have massive capabilities for building ships. And that's not even to talk about the ballistic missiles, the anti-ship ballistic missiles they've been developing, the hypersonic anti-ship missiles that they've been developing, that are all land-based. We can't shoot their ships that are attacking Taiwan from the United States. But from China, they can shoot our ships that are trying to interfere in Taiwan. Then they also have been outfitting civilian ships with missile batteries. They have many, many, many cargo ships. They have even more fishing ships. And each of them can be equipped with a missile battery. This is one of those situations where the naval battle around Taiwan is not even going to be close. we're going to lose tremendously. And yet when you start listening to politicians and you listen to people out there saying, oh, no, the United States Navy is the greatest out there and no one can compete with it. Well, China already can easily defeat the United States Navy in the area around Taiwan. That's not even contested. When you really push these military strategists or when they war game, they come to the conclusion almost 100% of the time that China will soundly defeat the U.S. Navy. Now, they'll have a lot more trouble with the U.S. Air Force, but U.S. Navy is falling far behind. And we're seeing just that arrogance of the United States where we think that we're dominant and no one else can compete with us. And yet we have some countries that are out there strongly working hard at competing with us while we are resting on our laurels, assuming that we're good. Food supply. We have arrogance in our food supply as well. We have turned all of the rice and wheat into the world as stocks and bonds that bankers can manipulate up and down. And these big manufacturers like Kellogg's and other food producers, Kraft, and all these guys who are buying raw grains and then turning it into products. They're jacking up the price at the grocery store for you and I, but they don't want to pay more for wheat. They don't want to pay more for corn. So what are they doing? They are getting onto these markets and they're manipulating the price downward, and they have been for a while, so that farmers are making nothing. Farmers are struggling to make any profit whatsoever, even while the prices at the grocery stores are at record highs. And this is resulting in some serious problems. The world stockpiles of wheat and rice are dropping dramatically. The world stockpile of wheat out there is the lowest since 2015. But that doesn't even tell the full story. While the United States and the West are playing this game of let's let the bankers manage all the food, which you and I get is a terrible idea. We should not have JP Morgan and we should not be having BlackRock deciding how much food should cost and making sure that we actually have enough food, because they tell us that they think there's too many people. That's kind of a scary thing to say. They think there's too many people, and what is their solution? Well, there should be less people. But China's not playing that game. China is stockpiling rice, stockpiling wheat. We see that they are disproportionately grabbing up more and more of the world's supply. China has the second largest wheat stockpile that they've ever had in history. And there's just that one aberration of a year where they had a little bit more going into the cough. Yep. And yeah, how do they foresee that and happen to have all that rice on hand? You know, someone should investigate that, but we know no one will. The U.S. has the lowest wheat stocks since 2007. Now, you do the math and tell me what the population of the United States is today, including non-citizens and people who shouldn't even be here, versus back in 2007. And you should tell me whether we should have the same stockpiles as we did back in 2007. We got a whole heck of a lot more mouths to feed, and we have less wheat to do it with. Same things happen with rice, corn, all these grains out there. The world stockpiles are dropping and the prices are not going up in a proportionate fashion because of the bankers. They're playing games, and farmers are just saying it's just not worth growing this stuff. In Pennsylvania, all the farmers are growing wheat, we're hearing. Why? Why are they growing wheat instead of growing corn like they usually do? Because fertilizer, folks. And let's look at what's going on with the power grid. This is just this ball that's rolling at us, like the stone ball in Indiana Jones, right? It's just coming right at us. We should probably be running, but we're not. The power grid in the United States, as we become more and more dependent upon the power grid. Everyone's got their gadgets and gizmos. People are plugging their cars in now. We are more dependent than ever on our electric grid as Americans, and yet our electric grid is becoming less and less reliable. Back in 2000, there were less than 24 major disruptions to the power grid. In 2020, there were 180. The power grid is getting older and older and older. We have 70% of the transmission lines in the United States are closing in on need to be replacement, or they are beyond replacement period already. Most of the transmission lines and transmission towers for the electrical grid were built shortly after World War II. We have an energy grid that's built for the energy needs of the people in the 60s and 70s. Friends, now we have a bunch of morons that want to run around and plug in all of their cars simultaneously into the power grid. And just recently, we've been moving away from coal, dependable coal, and moving towards natural gas and renewable energy sources. Renewable energy sources go up and down, fluctuations in time. They don't deal well with cold weather and snowy conditions. And so we're seeing that that becomes less and less regular, and we're burning more expensive natural gas. It's becoming less reliable, more expensive, as we're doing this great transformation. All those things lead together to the point where every year, as we have extremely hot days and we have extremely cold days, we are having more and more power outages that are happening, like the one back in Texas a couple years back. Things are just not working out, and the energy grid is straining at the seams to keep up. Friends, we have seen the dominoes starting to fall. And they've been set up for decades and decades and decades. Bad choices upon bad choices. And that's not even to get into the national debt. That's not even to get into all this money that we've borrowed. Not to talk about inflation. There's so many different aspects in which we have set up the most tremendous, most awful, tragic domino set. And we're seeing them starting to fall. All you can do these days is protect yourself, protect your family as best you can. Become more self-sufficient, stockpile, a mixture of the two, and get more prepared. Because friends, there's going to be few places to hide when this all comes down, and we're moving into that period right now. All right, folks, if you found this video to be useful or helpful, you might want to check out another video right here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.